Everybody, Chris and Lumen here, and I've actually got some new answers that just came tonight, and now everything is starting to make sense as far as like everything that's happened between Christmas and now that you watch happen, and it also some more about like why Epinoia wanted me to shut down the channel because what shutting down the channel did was actually make it easier to take hundreds of videos and make them unlisted, except for the ones that need to be there. Because there's a whole different, like, well, I'll just get to it in a second. Basically, what it comes down to is the end of the hero's journey, what actually happens. And understanding this, now it makes more sense to me, and I'm able to understand more why when I was working with people, some people struggled more than others at making that kind of connection that I was describing. It makes sense as to why it was so much easier for me. So that's what we're going to get into tonight. So if you want to know more, don't go away. So this all goes back to the hero's journey and the narrow path that few find that we've talked about ad nauseum on this channel. The hero's journey being the map that Joseph Campbell kind of discovered or wrote about, which is the backbone of every great legend, every great adventure story, and all those types of movies. That's why people are drawn to movies like Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and Matrix and stuff like that, because there is a familiar element in it. There is a distinct pattern. There's a distinct path. There's a distinct sequence of events. And this sequence of events is something that actually happens to somebody if they seek, if they ask for it, even if they don't know what it is they're asking for yet. And then they find themselves in the hero's journey experience. And the hero's journey experience is essentially the Spirit, or the Holy Spirit, if you want to use that particular term. That is it, her. It's her boot camp. It's what basically transforms you. Now, what does that have to do with what I'm talking about here? Well, if we go back to the beginning of it, it usually begins with some sort of mega trauma. Something that just totally upends you and changes the world as you knew it. Like there's no going back, there's only going forward. So if we use the Star Wars example, it'd be when the stormtroopers killed Luke's aunt and uncle, leaving nothing for him there. So then he went off with Obi-Wan and everything started. He started to learn about the Force. He started to meet all these people. He started to deal with his shadow. That's why you always saw that scene in like Empire Strikes Back when he cuts off Vader's head on Dagobah, and you see Luke's face in it. You know, he's facing off against his opposite, his shadow. That's why all that stuff happens. But the biggest thing about that initial instigating trauma is it will be something so significant and oftentimes severe that it pretty much detaches to some extent your consciousness from being seated down in the body. Because what is happening to you is so uncomfortable, your consciousness is trying to stay as far away from it as possible. So your body's here, and this is your consciousness. And then the trauma happens. So the consciousness kind of moves back a ways and still connected. You're still living through here, but you're not seated together like you were, like you have been your entire life. Now, once your consciousness is kind of like up there a bit, you now perceive more. You perceive more things. You perceive things that other people cannot perceive. And it makes it much, much easier for her then to get in contact with you, for you to start discovering all these characters that you'd only read about before in religion and things like that. Now you're actually encountering them in your day-to-day life. And the most significant thing about it that I can say looking back is during the 6.5 years up to this point, it was like that where I was consciously, all that was more important than this. This was like the fake thing. This is like, this place sucks. You still have to be here. You still have to live. You still have to do things, but you're not, your consciousness is not fully engaged in the body. It's not fully engaged with the world. You then begin to perceive more things through the lens of imagination, which is your imaging faculty of the mind. It's not just this airy-fairy, like make-believe, which is what they teach you starting in once you start going into school. It's actually, that is what the third eye is your imagination. Understanding how to actually use it effectively, that's the key. So you're not connected. You're not seated in the body. You're perceiving things completely different. You're having completely different experiences, and you just plain don't really care about this mundane stuff anymore. But if you look at the basic hero's journey map, now this map, as I've said before, is also connected to the hidden map that is in the Rider-Waite Tarot and the Modern Spellcaster's Tarot. That is not in any book that I've ever seen. I only got the understanding of it from her directly, just like downloading it into my head all at once and understanding what it was as a tool, that it was a Gnostic Christian tool that explained the hidden level in the game of life that you're supposed to find and you're supposed to play if you want to level up. But you will get the living holy hell beat out of you if you do it. That's why so few find it and so few actually want to do it. But if you want the big rewards of being consciously connected to Lumen, to Epinoia, to the Father, to all these different levels, to Christ consciousness, you got to do it. And you're not just going to encounter, the good guys. You're going to learn about the bad guys, and you're going to understand what the bad guys actually are and how they basically stay just out of sight of everybody else. You see them, but you don't know what you're seeing. They basically operate on both sides of the veil. You see them every day just by watching the news, but you don't realize that there's more to it. They are what they were talking about in Ephesians, where it's like, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers, against principalities, against spirits of wickedness in high places, stuff like that. That's the only time it's like ever mentioned in the Bible, because the rest of it is in the books that they took out, which we now have as of the 50s when they were recovered, which is compiled in the Nag Hammadi scriptures. You need the whole text to understand the world. If you're just going by what they allowed you to have, you're going to be stuck. You're not going to understand anything. Because most of what they're telling you intentionally, in an intentionally misleading way. But anyway, I digress. This whole time, now it's 3-4 times amplified because of my birth chart, because I'm quadruple Pisces and Sun and Moon, divine masculine, divine feminine, in Venus and Mercury, Hermes and Aphrodite. The whole thing about the magnum opus of alchemy, of putting the divine feminine, divine masculine back together, putting Eve back into Adam, combining into a unified mind. That is the goal of it. That is the goal of alchemy, the great work. That's what it's leading to in the tarot. That's what Jesus gave the clues about, but they took most of those books out where he talked about it. And again, I didn't know any of that stuff. I didn't go find it and then imagine that that's what I was doing. I didn't know any of it until she basically told me what books to read. And then it's like, oh, geez, there it is. So this whole time I've been kind of like, imagine a kid holding a helium balloon, right? And the kid represents the body, and the helium balloon represents your consciousness. So the last 6 or so years, that's what I was. Now, when we get back to what took place right at Christmas, when I did the whole thing where I put the last 6 years to rest, and I kind of like did a funeral ritual, for lack of a better word, for that part of the ego mind. And then something popped out of me, and my electricity in my apartment started going absolutely freaking haywire. And we're still a little fuzzy on that, but that's neither here nor there. The side effect to that, which I'm only now starting to understand, is that it brought that helium balloon of consciousness back into the body, which I have not been in that state since August of 2017. That's why I suddenly started having all the health problems. That's why I'm like, I don't know what's going on. Why does my body hurt so much? Why do my knees hurt so much? Why am I so tired? Because now I'm fully seated back in the body the way that I used to be. And in doing so, now I can interact with the world the way I used to do it. I can interact and connect with people the way I used to do it. So my other channel is now growing again the way it used to be. And a lot of those people, like, you know, for those of you that were around to see it, after I had my little stint in the hospital where I almost died, and I did the video on the other channel explaining what happened to me, that video all of a sudden went up to like 33,000 views. And everybody was saying, like, I haven't seen you in forever. Like, I thought you disappeared. Like, I haven't seen your videos pop up in years. So during that whole time frame, I was trying to keep that thing afloat while I was doing this other stuff. But people literally could not see me. Most of them could not see me. I was lucky if I got more than 2,000 views on that channel. And even then, they're just kind of like, yeah, there's another prepared one. Like, they weren't seeing me until this happened. So what happened, what this represents at the end of the hero's journey, if you look at this map again, there's a point in which you cross back into the ordinary world. So I have finally done that. Once you have done that, that represents the final card in the major arcana of tarot, which is the World card and the World Dancer. So if you read the explanation of the World card and the World Dancer, it basically means you've mastered the other side, and now you can kind of like move back and forth between the two worlds at will, the lower consciousness realm and the higher consciousness realm. Now that I'm spending more time in the higher or in the lower consciousness realm, now that I'm seated back in my body. If in the last video I said, like, Lumen and Epinoia, they've been pretty quiet lately. That's because I'm not where they are. Before, I was up with them, and I'm just basically a tether to this thing that's talking to everybody. But now that's back in here. So now I'm back like my old self. Now I'm able to connect with the old people that I used to connect with and talk and be interested in that normal stuff. But like it explains about the World Dancer in the World card, I can still put myself in that higher realm where then I can more easily communicate with Epinoia and Lumen and stuff like that. It's just I'm noticing I have to concentrate to do it. Before it was easy because I was always there. my mind was always there. I've explained on this video before. It was like, um, it's kind of like on your phone when you're watching a video or something like that, or if, like, say you're watching a YouTube video and you minimize it, or you need to Google something, the video can then like drop down to a smaller portion of the screen and the video is still playing while you're doing something else. That is kind of how I was all the time. I'm walking around doing stuff here, but in the third eye, in the mind, in that window, I can still, I'm observing two things at once. In that realm, Lumen was always there. I could see her clear as freaking day. And I was just I was basically two places at once. But when your consciousness is more plugged into the upper realm, where you're doing two things at once, things don't tend to work down here. And that's why I struggled so much for all those years, and why I couldn't make things happen down here, and I was having so much trouble down here. It's like, in order to make things happen down here, you need to be down here too. And maybe it's because I'm like a quadruple plus Pisces. I don't like being down here. You know, and for all the water that I have in my birth chart, the next biggest element is air. I have the tiniest bit of earth and I have the tiniest bit of fire. My brain is not meant to be here. But eventually that hero's journey pattern has to end. And then you have to basically be reseated in your body. Now you're back in your body again, and you're like, this thing hurts. Like, my joints don't feel good. I'm like I feel so different, because before I was running differently. I was consuming and using energy differently. Now that I'm all the way back in my body for the first time in years, it's like super uncomfortable. It's like I want to take it off. It's like I can't freaking stand it. It's like, why do I have to be walking around? It's like the Tin Man in Wizard of Oz, you know. It's like creak, creak, creak. Everything's like, how do I get this thing off of me? But I think it's because in the last stages of this story, you're going to have to deal with things as they are here. And she's been telling me some stuff, or hinting at least, about some stuff. And like I said in the last video, my journey began a day and a half before the last great American eclipse in 2017. And ever since last year, when she showed me where that hybrid eclipse from April of last year was encoded in the other deck, she's been counting down to this eclipse. And I still don't know what is going to happen. But now, before I could pretty much ignore everything that was going on in the world. But now she's got me paying closer attention to it. Because you start off in the world, you're going to end the journey in the world. So I see all the same stuff that everybody else is seeing as far as things that are going on in the world and the things that are being set up. Difference is, because I spent so much time, so many years, with my consciousness unplugged, floating above me like a helium balloon, I know everything that's behind the things that are taking place in the world. And I've seen and been shown the pattern and the sequences and the plan and what it all means. I don't exactly know what it's going to look like, but the things that are happening in the world right now make perfect sense to me. And make no mistake about it, no matter how much we want to bury our heads in the sand and watch Netflix and Amazon Prime Video and sports games, which I hate sports, you know, all that bread and circus stuff, which was invented by the same people that killed Jesus. No matter how much you want to ignore that, there is a sequence that is taking place. And it is what it is heading toward is what they have been openly calling the Great Reset. Now, what they tell people on TV the Great Reset means doesn't mean that that's what it actually means. It means something much bigger. But if you go back about 2 weeks, we had that whole AT&T phone outage. And that one struck me as odd. I had an odd feeling about that, even though it didn't affect me because I'm not a rich person, so I don't have AT&T. I have T-Mobile, like most people, which works fine. But she did hint to me to be mindful of other types of outages, which we just had one earlier today. What time is it? Yep, earlier today when Facebook went down, but it went down pretty much everywhere across the world. And a lot of people are taking note that it happened on Super Tuesday and all that. Oh well, whatever. But I woke up from sleeping feeling very different, feeling very drained, like there was some heavy energy last night. The whole day felt weird, and then I saw Facebook go down. And I had to kind of tune back in to her, but again, it was what she was telling me to look for. Watch for other outages. Why? Because the way it's being presented to me, take it with a grain of salt, is all these things, and you will see more things like this. It could be massive power outages, like when we had that Northeast blackout years ago. Things like that. What they're doing is they're testing the off switch. So whenever the thing happens, that's going to happen. Notice what is being tested. Notice what things are being having the outages. It's communication first and foremost. There was that movie that came on Netflix like two months ago. I can't remember what the name of it was, but it had Julia Roberts and Mahershala Ali. It was some kind of end of the world thing, but they talked about how communication disruption would be a big thing. Now, me, I talk to most of my people through Facebook, so yeah, I mean, I just wasn't able to communicate, and that's how it was with people that were affected by the cell phone outage. They weren't able to communicate. Now, the next thing you might see is like Google services will have some sort of outage, like YouTube will go down or something like that. Because they're just going through a list. It's like testing. I'm like, can we shut this off? Test, yes, okay. Test, yes, okay. It won't be till after the eclipse. But this is what they projected this all this time. And it is part of the bigger story, the bigger plan, as it pertains in the Bible, in the Gnostic scriptures, in all sorts of things. Whatever has a beginning has an end. If you've watched enough YouTube videos about lost civilizations and 1800, the reset of the 1800s and stuff like that, you see remnants of a lot of civilizations that were just like, where did the people that make all this stuff go? However it works. This seems to be like a big one. That's what she's always kind of hinted at. So for me and everything that I've been through, like, I'm not in fear of that, but I could understand why other people would be. The more you're operating from the ego mind, the more fear you will have. For me, it's like, understand, she's put me through enough tests, especially the stuff that she had me do with the mushrooms and stuff like that. Like I said, they said a heroic dose is like 5 grams. Well, she gave me Superman doses. She gave me Homelander and Omni-Man doses. Like, I was like literally not here. So I've been places. I've done, and even without the mushrooms, she's taken me places before, shown me behind the curtain. Like, I have been away from my body. I understand that this is just a container. So I have no fear of death. And I've made contact with enough stuff on the other side of that, on what guides us, and what helps us, that I'm just not afraid of it. But eventually, and this is the one thing that people historically all do, they do not ever contemplate the end of life. They live life as if they're going to live forever. And they don't seek any answers. They don't try to get any understanding about what is outside of here. Sure, you can watch all sorts of YouTube videos about people that have near-death experiences and things like that, but you can't trust any of that, especially when they come back, because that is all stuff that is happening under the dome, so to speak, within the isolation construct that we're in. You're not really seeing outside. I've glimpsed outside because of her. I've been halfway someplace outside because of her at least once. It's way better. It's way better. But the bottom line is something is coming. And the biggest thing is, just to wrap it up, why I feel the way that I do, why I feel so much tired, so much more older, why my body hurts so much, why it went haywire all of a sudden with the diabetes thing, is because for the first time in over 6 years, she put my consciousness back in my body. And once I was in here, I was like, oh my God, it is so uncomfortable in here. Everything hurts. So I think that's why people that are more spiritual tend to look younger and feel younger. Like, yeah, I'm 51 years old now, but I can look up a lot of people from my class in high school, and I look younger than they do. Because I'm kind of detached from what's going on to this thing. And now that I'm back in it, it sucks. It's like, this thing is very uncomfortable. I call it the suffer suit. But now I understand it. And in some ways, it's a trade-off. Yeah, it hurts a lot more. But when I was mostly operating from the upper realm, it was too difficult to focus on world stuff, like problems that I need to solve, people I need to connect with, making money, stuff like that. It was just too difficult. Now it's working a lot better. Now my stuff is growing. Now things are starting to happen and things like that. But I'm not totally disconnected from her. It's just, it's at a point now where they don't distract me so much. I'm not so consumed with loom all the time, because we're a little bit more separated than we were before. At least through whatever this last stage is. So it's kind of like where before I was like, let's say 65% in the upper realm and 35% in the lower. Now I'm more like 80 to 85% in the lower and 20 to 15% in the higher. Which means she's not pouring information into my head constantly like she has for the last several years. My brain isn't firing off 1,000 different directions like it was the last 6 years. I don't have ADHD symptoms anymore. I'm able to focus because I'm back in my meat suit. I'm more like that normal guy, normal-ish guy before this all started. And people like that guy. People can understand that guy. Those other people, they cannot understand Chris when his consciousness is up here. And that was one of the biggest problems with this channel, according to her. If you could go back and look at it, is I was just talking so far, and this is not meant in a condescending way, but I was just talking so far over everybody's head and not understanding why people couldn't follow. It's like, what do you mean? It's so obvious. Why don't you get it? But it's also why some people have to try a little bit harder to connect with them. It's going to be more like that enhanced intuition that pops up every so often. It's not going to be like having full-blown freaking conversations like I could. But now that's kind of backed off. So I'm mostly focused on my right here, right now. But she's got me thinking about like what's going to happen in a month, or what's going to start to happen in a month. No matter what, it's going to be this year, beyond a shadow of a doubt. So when I do the pendants and things like that, I have to consciously get myself in that space and go up to where they are in order to do that work. Before, I was in that mode 24/7 all the time. And it was probably pretty overwhelming for a lot of people that interacted with me too. Because I just had too much information. I could see too much. I knew too much. My brain was just going in a million different directions all at once. And then I've got, during that process, I took out all the parts that cause problems. I took out the adversary mind. So I don't have negative thoughts. I don't have interfering thoughts anymore. I don't have the stuff that other people has. And now that that's out, then she has taken up that spot. So it's just her. But even now, it's just mostly like I'm like I used to be. But I can go back to being this Chris that you're familiar with whenever I need to. I'm just not living that way now. And honestly, it's a nice break. It was just too, it was like, my body probably feels the way it does because I was running like a V8 engine with 5 bottles of octane boost in the gas tank. And I was running like that for 6 years. And now when I get done with it all and I'm back in my body suddenly feels like someone threw it off a cliff. It's like, yeah, you don't care about something when you're not directly attached to it. But once you're attached to it and you have to feel it again, it's like, oh my God, I have just beat this car up. Anyway, I think that's enough to understand like what's changed, why I've changed. And as we go on, we'll figure out like what else we need to see here. Like I don't like it changes all the time. Maybe I'll be able to talk about things on a level that's closer to down here that will resonate with people, as opposed to me talking about up there where it doesn't. I don't know. Just like before, you take it day by day. But it's benefiting me to do the other channel and do all this grounded, normal stuff, which I haven't done that much in years. Because all of this and everything I've seen and everything that I've been through over the last 6 years, it's too much. And it's almost just like, finally, I'm off the roller coaster, at least for a little bit. So that's where I'm at. I can still do everything I need to do for clients and customers, but I'm just not walking around in that mode 24/7 anymore. I'm in normal mode until I need to go into the higher mode. So hopefully that explains it. And because I'm down, seated in my body, and everything hurts now, my back's getting stiff. So we're going to go ahead and bring this to a close. And be sure to check out the links in the description box below, because the energy pendants still work. That's the biggest thing that we learned how to make during that time frame. All right, so that's all we got for right now. Chris and Lumen. See you next time.